The vast emptiness of space near the Orion Nebula suddenly rippled like water disturbed by a thrown stone. Stars seemed to bend and twist as reality itself groaned under an impossible strain. Then, with a thunderous silence that somehow echoed across the vacuum, a massive shape tore through the fabric of space-time. The UES Prometheus emerged from its thousand-year slumber like an ancient titan awakening from the depths of the ocean. Its hull, scarred by battles long forgotten, stretched for nearly 15 kilometers from bow to stern. The Supercarrier's armor plating, a strange alloy that seemed to drink in starlight, showed signs of damage that would have destroyed any known vessel 10 times over. Yet here it was, intact and very much alive. Deep within the ship's core, emergency systems flickered to life. Red lights bathed empty corridors in an eerie glow as automated repair drones, dormant for centuries, began their pre-programmed awakening sequences. The ship's AI, designation Artemis 7, ran through millions of diagnostic checks in microseconds. Memory banks corrupted, navigation systems offline, communication arrays damaged beyond immediate repair. But the core systems remained functional, protected by redundancies upon redundancies that only human paranoia could have designed. In the command center, a single cryogenic pod began its defrosting cycle. Inside, Captain Sarachen's body started the slow journey back from the edge of death. Ice crystals on her eyelashes began to melt as warming fluids pumped through her veins. Her heart, stopped for a millennium, gave its first tentative beat. Then another. Then a steady rhythm as ancient human stubbornness refused to yield to the laws of probability. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Galactic Coalition sensor networks detected an anomaly. The energy signature was unlike anything in their databases, yet somehow familiar in a way that sent chills through species that didn't even have spines. On the Coalition's capital world of Zirian Prime, emergency sessions were called. The Vorthan delegates, with their crystalline bodies humming with anxiety, presented the data to the assembly. "The readings are impossible," clicked Ambassador Vextor, his mandibles chattering nervously. "No ship of that mass could generate such power signatures. The energy output alone exceeds our most advanced dreadnoughts by a factor of 12. The Etherian representative, a being of pure energy contained within a humanoid shell, pulsed with colors of concern. More troubling is what our deep space archives have revealed. This signature, it matches records from the Extinction War. Records we thought were corrupted data from damaged sensors." A heavy silence fell over the assembly. The Extinction War was ancient history, a conflict so devastating that entire star systems had been rendered uninhabitable. The aggressors in that war had vanished afterward, leaving only burnt worlds and terrified survivors who would eventually band together to form the coalition. Most believed the attackers had destroyed themselves in their bloodlust. But there had always been whispers, legends of the race that had nearly ended all life in the galaxy before disappearing into the void. The humans. Back aboard the Prometheus, Captain Chen's eyes snapped open. For a moment, she saw nothing but blur and light. Then, her enhanced retinas adjusted, and she found herself staring at a familiar ceiling. The pod's lid hissed open, and she sat up slowly, muscles protesting after their long sleep. Her neural implant immediately synced with the ship's systems, and data flooded her consciousness. "Artemis," she croaked, her voice rough from disuse. "Status report." The AI's response came not through speakers, but directly into her mind. "Welcome back, Captain. We have been in emergency stasis for approximately 1,047 standard years. The quantum drive malfunction has been contained, but we have emerged in unknown space. I am detecting multiple artificial structures and energy signatures consistent with advanced civilizations." Chun swung her legs out of the pod, standing on unsteady feet. The muscle stimulators in the pod had kept her body from complete atrophy, but she still felt weak. She made her way to the command console, each step becoming more confident as her enhanced physiology adapted. "Show me everything," she ordered. Holographic displays sprang to life around her, showing star charts, sensor readings, and tactical assessments. Her eyes widened as she absorbed the information. The galaxy had changed. New species, new technologies, massive space stations, and trade routes crisscrossing between stars. And at the center of it all, a vast political entity called the Galactic Coalition. "They've built quite the civilization," she murmured. Then, her expression hardened as she noticed something else. Artemis analyzed their military capabilities. Analysis complete. Their technology has advanced considerably in some areas, particularly in energy efficiency and communication. However, their weapons systems and defensive capabilities are inferior to our current loadout. Shin nodded slowly. The humans of her era had been warriors, forced to become the monsters that other monsters feared. The Prometheus alone carried enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. Its fighter complement, still sleeping in their hangars, could overwhelm most defensive fleets. But that was the old way, the path that had nearly led to their own destruction. "Begin revival procedures for the command staff," she ordered, "and start repair protocols. Whatever happened to us, we're going to need the ship at full capacity." As the Prometheus began to awaken fully, its massive engines humming to life with a sound that vibrated through subspace itself, Coalition sensors across 3 sectors went wild. On 100 worlds, military commanders stared at their displays in disbelief. Energy readings that shouldn't be possible. A ship that dwarfed their mightiest vessels. And, worst of all, the quantum signature that marked it unmistakably as human technology. On Zirian Prime, the Coalition assembly descended into chaos. Some called for immediate military action. Others counseled caution. The Vorthan military caste began mobilizing their fleets, while the peaceful Luminari urged diplomatic contact. But all of them, every single being in that vast chamber, felt the same thing, fear. The humans had returned. In her ready room, Captain Shin reviewed the historical data that Artemis had managed to intercept from Coalition transmissions. Her expression grew darker with each file. After humanity's disappearance, the galaxy had apparently decided they were monsters, bogeymen to frighten children. The truth of the Extinction War had been twisted, turned into propaganda. They didn't know about the Devourers, the extra-dimensional horrors that humanity had sacrificed everything to stop. They only remembered the burning worlds, the dead fleets, the human ships that had fought with a fury born of desperation. "They've rewritten history," she said quietly. "Made us the villains of their bedtime stories." "Captain," Artemis interjected, "I'm detecting multiple fleets converging on our position. Preliminary analysis suggests they are military vessels. Shall I begin defensive protocols?" Chun stood up, straightening her uniform. The weight of command settled on her shoulders like an old, familiar friend. She had gone to sleep hoping to wake up in a galaxy at peace, where humanity could start fresh. Instead, she had awakened to find their sacrifices forgotten and their name cursed. "No," she said firmly, "we're not the monsters they think we are. But prepare all systems for immediate deployment. If they want to fight, they'll get one. But first, let's try talking." She walked to the bridge, where her newly awakened command crew was taking their stations. Faces she had known for years, brothers and sisters in arms who had followed her through hell and back. They looked to her now for guidance, just as they had 1,000 years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had once commanded fleets that darkened the skies of worlds. "We've awakened to a changed galaxy. Our sacrifices have been forgotten, our name turned to curse. But we are still human. We are still the shield against the darkness, even if they don't remember what darkness we held at bay." She paused, looking at each of them in turn. "The Galactic Coalition is mobilizing against us. They think we're conquerors returned to finish what we started. They're wrong, but proving that might be the hardest battle we've ever fought." On the main screen, the first Coalition ships appeared at the edge of sensor range. Sleek vessels with graceful lines and gleaming hulls, so different from the brutal efficiency of human design. Chen could see the tactical display showing their weapons powering up, their shields raising. They were terrified, and terrified people did stupid things. "Open a channel," she commanded. "All frequencies." Channel open, Captain, her communications officer reported. Chen took a deep breath. First contact with a galaxy that thought humans were extinct. A galaxy that feared them more than death itself. She had to get this right, or the cycle of violence would begin again. Attention Galactic Coalition Vaisseau. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth ship Prometheus. We are not your enemy. We have awakened from a long sleep to find the galaxy changed. We mean you no harm. I repeat, we are not your enemy. We request dialogue and peaceful contact. The response was immediate. Dozens of ships opened fire at once, their energy beams and projectiles streaking across space toward the Prometheus. On the bridge, alarms blared as the tactical display lit up like a Christmas tree. Chen's expression didn't change. She had hoped for better, but prepared for worse. The Prometheus's shields, designed to withstand bombardment from Devourer bio ships, barely flickered under the assault. The Coalition's weapons, advanced as they might be by their standards, were like rain against a mountain. Captain, her tactical officer reported, voice tense, no damage to shields. Their weapons are insufficient. Chen nodded grimly. This was exactly what she had wanted. The Coalition would see their ineffective attack and assume the Prometheus was invulnerable. Fear would turn to panic, panic to desperation. And desperate people did more than stupid things. They did terrible things. Artemis analyzed their attack patterns. Are they targeting specific systems? Negative, Captain. Their fire patterns suggest they are attempting maximum damage across our hull. They do not appear to know our vulnerable points. Because they didn't have any records of actual human ship designs, Chen realized. The few wrecks left from the Extinction War would have been too damaged to study properly. The Coalition was fighting blind against an enemy they knew only from legends. Ma'am, her sensor officer called out, detecting massive energy buildup from the lead Coalition vessel. Unknown weapon type, but power levels are significant. On the screen, the largest Coalition ship, a beautiful vessel of silver and blue that must have been their flagship, began to glow. Energy coursed along its hull in patterns that would have been artistic if they weren't meant for destruction. Whatever weapon they were preparing, it was clearly their trump card. Should we raise additional defenses? Her executive officer asked quietly. Chen shook her head. No, let them fire. They need to see that their best isn't enough. Only then will they be willing to listen. The Coalition flagship fired. A beam of pure entropy lanced out, a weapon that aged matter itself, that could turn the strongest armor to dust in seconds. It was, Chun had to admit, an impressive achievement for a civilization that had developed without the constant pressure of extinction humanity had faced. The beam struck the Prometheus dead center and splashed harmlessly against shields designed to resist weapons that could crack planets. On the Coalition flagship, Admiral Zektor of the Vorthan Imperial Navy stared at his displays in disbelief. The entropy cannon was their most powerful weapon, developed over centuries of research, capable of aging a dreadnought to dust in moments. It had done absolutely nothing to the human vessel. Impossible, he whispered, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. The power requirements for shields of that magnitude. Admiral, his sensor officer interrupted, voice shaking. The human vessel is broadcasting something, not on communication channels. It's writing in our computers. Text appeared on every screen in the Coalition fleet simultaneously. Simple words in perfect galactic standard. Are you finished? Can we talk now? Admiral Zektor felt his chitin plates rattle with fear. The human ship had penetrated their cybersecurity as easily as their weapons had been deflected. They were completely at the humans' mercy, and everyone knew humans had no mercy. Except they were still alive. The human vessel hadn't returned fire. It had sat there, taking everything they could throw at it, and then asked to talk. That wasn't the behavior of the monsters from the stories. Monsters didn't ask to talk. They destroyed. Admiral, his communications officer, spoke up. We're receiving another transmission from the human vessel. Audio only. Play it. Zektor ordered, though every instinct screamed at him to order a retreat. The voice that came through the speakers was tired, patient, and undeniably human. Admiral, I understand your fear. I know what your histories say about us, but those histories are incomplete. We didn't disappear because we lost the war. We disappeared because we won it at a cost so terrible we couldn't face the galaxy anymore. But we're back now, and the galaxy needs to know the truth. Please, let us talk. Zektor's tactical officer leaned in close. Admiral, their weapons systems are powered down. They're showing us they're not a threat. The Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously. Everything about this went against doctrine. When facing a superior enemy, you retreated, regrouped, and found their weakness. But what if the enemy didn't want to be your enemy? What if the monsters of legend were something else entirely? Order all ships to cease fire, he commanded, ignoring the shocked looks from his bridge crew, and open a channel to the human vessel. Back on the Prometheus, Captain Chun allowed herself a small smile as the coalition weapons fire ceased. It was a start. Not a good start, but a start nonetheless. Captain, Artemis reported, I'm detecting stand-down orders throughout the coalition fleet. Their flagship is signaling for communication. Put them through, Chen ordered, straightening her uniform again. First contact, take 2. The screen shimmered, and she found herself looking at a Vorthan admiral. She had never seen the species before, but her neural implant quickly provided relevant data from intercepted transmissions. Six-limbed, chitinous, evolved from pack hunters. A warrior culture that valued honor and strength. Good. Warriors she could work with. Admiral, she began formally. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the UES Prometheus. Thank you for holding your fire. The Vorthan's mandibles clicked in what her implant suggested was nervousness. Captain Chun, your vessel has proven resistant to our weapons. Why have you not destroyed us? The question was so simple, yet so revealing. They expected destruction because that's what the stories had taught them to expect from humans. Chen chose her words carefully. Because, Admiral, despite what your histories might say, humans are not conquerors. We were defenders. The Extinction War wasn't about conquest. It was about survival. Not just ours, but yours as well. Our histories say otherwise, the Admiral responded, though she could hear doubt in his translated voice. They speak of human fleets that burned worlds, that showed no mercy. Your histories are incomplete, Chen said firmly. Tell me, Admiral, do your records mention what we were fighting? Do they explain why we burned those specific worlds? Do they say anything about the dimensional rifts that were opening across the galaxy? The silence that followed was telling. Chen pressed on. We called them the Devourers, extra-dimensional entities that consumed not just life, but reality itself. They entered our dimension through rifts that could only form on worlds with specific conditions. We didn't burn those worlds because we wanted to, Admiral. We burned them because it was the only way to stop the rifts from stabilizing. On the Coalition flagship's bridge, Admiral Zektor's 6 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. The human's words stirred something in the deepest archives of Vorthan memory. Whispered legends his great Hive Mother had told, stories older than the Coalition itself. Tales of the Skyrenders, the things that ate stars. You're saying, he began slowly, that you destroyed worlds to save the galaxy? The human captain's expression was grim. We destroyed worlds to save reality itself, Admiral. And when it was over, when the last rift was sealed and the Devourers pushed back to their dimension, we looked at what we had become. We had turned ourselves into the greatest killers the galaxy had ever seen, because anything less wouldn't have been enough. So we left. We ran from what we had done, from the necessary evil we had become. She paused, and Zektor could see the weight of ages in her eyes, though she looked no older than a young adult of her species. We put ourselves to sleep, Admiral, hoping that when we woke, the galaxy would have healed, that perhaps we could find redemption in a universe that had forgotten our sins. Instead, we find that you remember only the sins, not the reason for them. Behind Chun, her bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, but Zektor's trained, I could see they were ready for anything. These weren't the rabid conquerors of Coalition propaganda. These were professional soldiers, disciplined and controlled. Dangerous not because they were monsters, but because they were very, very good at war. If what you say is true, Zektor said carefully, you would have evidence. Data, records, something to prove these devourers existed. Chen nodded. We do. Terabytes of sensor data, biosamples in stasis, even the captured remains of scout form. We kept it all, hoping that someday someone will want to know the truth. She gestured to someone off-screen. I'm transmitting a data packet now. Just the overview. The full records would overwhelm your systems. But it should be enough to verify what I'm telling you. Zektor's data officer worked furiously at their station, then turned with all 6 eyes wide. Admiral, the data, it's genuine. Quantum signatures confirm it's from the Extinction War era. And the readings by the Seven Suns, sir, these entities, they're real. The bridge fell silent as officers reviewed the transmitted data. Images of things that shouldn't exist, sensor readings that defied physics, and combat footage that showed human ships fighting desperately against enemies that seemed to bend reality around them. And through it all, the methodical, terrible necessity of burning worlds where rifts had taken hold. The Kepler massacre, Zektor breathed, recognizing one of the most infamous events from a war. You burned 3 garden worlds in that system. Billions died. Because a primary rift was forming, Chen replied steadily. If it had stabilized, the devourers would have poured through in numbers that would have consumed the entire sector within days. We held them for 6 months, Admiral. 6 months of nonstop combat, losing ships faster than we could build them. And when we realized we couldn't win conventionally, we made the hardest choice any human has ever made. She stood up, and Zektor could see the full weight of command on her shoulders. We deployed the Nova Protocol. We detonated those worlds' cores simultaneously, creating a feedback pulse that destabilized the rift. 3 worlds died so that thousands could live. And every human involved in that decision spent the rest of their lives seeing those burning worlds every time they closed their eyes. The data supported everything she said. Energy readings that matched theoretical models for dimensional intrusion. Biological samples that couldn't have evolved in this universe. And the timeline showed that every world burned had been showing the same anomalous readings just before destruction. Why didn't you tell anyone? Zektor asked, his voice subdued. Why didn't you explain? Chen's laugh was bitter. We tried, Admiral, but who listens to explanations from someone covered in blood? We had become death incarnate, and the galaxy was too traumatized to hear anything but its own fear. So we finished the job alone, sealed the last rifts, and then we ran. We hoped that time would let the wounds heal. That maybe in 1,000 years we could return and find forgiveness. And instead you found a galaxy that made you into monsters of legend, Zektor finished. He understood now. The humans hadn't disappeared because they were defeated or because they were cowards. They had exiled themselves as penance for saving everyone. An alert chimed on his console. The Coalition Assembly was demanding updates, and dozens more fleets were converging on their position. The entire military might of the Coalition was mobilizing against a threat that wasn't a threat at all. Captain Shun, he said formally, I believe we have much to discuss. And we need to discuss it quickly before someone does something that can't be undone. Chen nodded. Agreed. I'm prepared to meet with you and any representatives the Coalition wishes to send. We have no intention of resuming the war, Admiral. We just want to find our place in this new galaxy. That may be difficult, Zektor admitted. Fear of humanity has become one of the foundational elements of Coalition society. Proving you're not the monsters we've made you into will be the hardest battle we've ever fought, Chen finished. I know, but we've faced worse odds before. She paused, then added, There's something else you should know, Admiral. The reason we woke up now, after all this time, our deep sensors detected something. The same quantum signatures we saw 1,000 years ago. They're faint, distant, but growing stronger. Zektor's chitin plates rattled. You're saying? I'm saying the Devourers are probing our reality again. And this time, Admiral, you're going to need the monsters you've been taught to fear. As if to emphasize her point, the Prometheus's weapons system suddenly came online. Not aimed at the Coalition fleet, but outward toward the empty space between galaxies. Weapons that made the Coalition's best look like toys, all focused on an enemy that might not arrive for years, or might come tomorrow. The monsters had returned. But perhaps, just perhaps, they had returned just in time. The Coalition Assembly Hall on Zirion Prime had never been so silent. 3,000 delegates from over 100 species sat in stunned stillness as holographic displays showed the data Captain Shun had transmitted. The chamber, designed to accommodate beings ranging from the tiny crystalline shards to the massive gaseous nebula dwellers, now felt cramped and suffocating. High Chancellor Lyra of the Etherians floated at the central podium, her energy form pulsing with troubled colors. She had led the Coalition for 50 years through trade disputes and border conflicts, through technological breakthroughs and diplomatic triumphs. But nothing had prepared her for this. The return of humanity wasn't just a military crisis. It was an existential challenge to everything the Coalition had built. "The data has been verified by our best scientists," she announced, her harmonic voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "The dimensional readings are genuine. The biological samples match no known life forms from our universe. The combat footage—" She paused, her form flickering. "The combat footage shows human forces engaging entities that our physics says cannot exist." A Quellian delegate rose, on its dozen legs, speaking through its translation matrix. "This could be an elaborate deception. Humans were known for their cunning in warfare. How do we know this isn't simply propaganda to justify their atrocities?" Before Lyra could respond, Admiral Zektor's image appeared on the central display. The Vorthan officer looked exhausted, his chitin dulled from stress. "Because, honored delegates, I've seen their ship. I've witnessed their power. If the humans wanted to deceive us, they wouldn't need such elaborate stories. They could simply destroy us." He transmitted his tactical analysis, and gasps echoed through the chamber. The Prometheus's specifications were beyond anything in the Coalition database. Shields that could shrug off entropy weapons, armor composed of materials they couldn't even identify, and weapons that could crack moons with casual ease. "One ship," Zektor continued grimly. "One human ship held off my entire fleet without firing a shot. Their captain could have eliminated us in seconds, but instead she asked to talk. She showed us patience when she had every reason to show us death." The Luminari ambassador, a being of pure thought given form, chimed in with musical tones. "If these devourers truly existed, why have we found no evidence of them in 1,000 years? Why should we trust the words of a species that burned worlds?" A new voice cut through the debate, broadcast from the Prometheus itself. Captain Shin appeared on secondary screens, still in her command chair, still surrounded by her quietly efficient crew. "Because, Ambassador, we did our job too well. We didn't just fight the Devourers. We hunted them to extinction in this dimension. We traced every rift, destroyed every anchor point, and made sure they could never return." Her expression hardened. "At least we thought we had." She gestured, and new data flowed onto the displays. Star charts showing the outer rim of the galaxy, with pulsing red indicators marking anomalies. These readings started 3 months ago, relative to our position. Quantum fluctuations that match the early signs of dimensional intrusion. They're subtle, scattered, but growing stronger. The barriers between dimensions are weakening again. The assembly erupted in voices, clicks, harmonic tones, and other forms of communication. Fear rippled through the gathering like a physical force. If the humans were telling the truth, then the greatest threat in galactic history was returning. And if they were lying, then the greatest threat was already here in the form of a 15-kilometer warship. High Chancellor Lyra restored order with a pulse of pure authority. "Captain Shun, you say you wish to find your place in our galaxy. But how can we trust a species that committed genocide on a galactic scale?" Chin's response was immediate and unflinching. "You can't. Trust is earned, and we haven't had the chance to earn yours. All I can offer is the truth. We became monsters to fight monsters. We sacrificed our souls to save your lives. And when it was over, we couldn't live with what we'd become." She stood up, addressing the entire assembly through their screens. "But now we're back, and the threat is returning. You have a choice. You can fight us, waste resources, and lives in a battle you can't win, and leave yourselves weakened when the real enemy arrives. Or you can let us show you who we really are. Let us stand between you and the darkness one more time. In a secure bunker deep beneath the Coalition Defense Command, military leaders from dozens of species gathered around a tactical display. The Prometheus dominated the hologram, surrounded by increasingly desperate deployment options. Fleet Admiral Koss, a veteran Vorthan with scars covering half his chitin, studied the human vessel with professional respect. Even if we brought every ship in the Coalition here, he rumbled, we couldn't guarantee victory. Their technology it's not just advanced. It's advanced in directions we never even considered. General Thix of the Saurian Republic hissed agreement. Their shield harmonics alone would take us decades to decode. And their weapons. She pulled up the transmitted specifications. Gravitic lances, antimatter clusters, something called a reality anchor that I don't even pretend to understand. They built these tools to fight enemies we can't imagine. Which brings us to the real question, interjected Air Marshal Vreen of the Avian Confederation, his feathers rustling nervously. What if they're telling the truth? What if these devourers are real and returning? The room fell silent. It was the question none of them wanted to consider, because it changed everything. If humanity's great sin had actually been a necessary evil, if their genocide had been the salvation of the galaxy, then everything the Coalition believed about its own history was wrong. Admiral Koss finally broke the silence. I've been watching the tactical feeds from Zektor's encounter. The humans could have vaporized his fleet without effort. Instead, they sat there, taking fire, waiting for us to tire ourselves out like children having a tantrum. He looked around the room. That's not the behavior of conquerors. That's the behavior of adults dealing with frightened children. You're suggesting we trust them? General Thix asked, her reptilian eyes narrowing. I'm suggesting, Koss replied carefully, that we consider the possibility that the monsters under our bed might be the only things standing between us and the real darkness. Back on the Prometheus, Captain Chen met with her senior staff in the war room. The massive holographic display showed Coalition fleet movements, political structures, and technological assessments. It was a galaxy that had grown comfortable in humanity's absence, developing along paths of trade and cooperation rather than desperate militarization. They're not ready, Commander Marcus Torres, her tactical officer, said bluntly. If the Devourers return in force, the Coalition will fold like paper. Their best weapons are 1,000 years behind what we considered standard. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the chief science officer, nodded reluctantly. Their dimensional physics is particularly lacking. They've never needed to develop countermeasures against reality-warping attacks. They're sheep who've forgotten wolves exist. Then, we remind them, Chun said firmly. Not by being the wolves, but by showing them how to grow teeth. Captain, Artemis interjected through the room speakers, I'm detecting a massive quantum signature approaching at superluminal speeds. Configuration matches a Coalition dreadnought, Pax class. It's broadcasting diplomatic codes. Shin smiled slightly. It seems someone wants to talk face to face. How long until arrival? At their current velocity, approximately 6 hours. However, Captain, I'm also detecting something else. The dimensional fluctuations we've been monitoring, they've increased by 30% in the last hour. The room grew tense. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park, the navigation officer, pulled up the relevant data. It's not random. The fluctuations are following a pattern. They're probing, testing the barriers. How long? Shin asked quietly. Dr. Tanaka ran calculations on her neural interface. If the progression continues at this rate, weeks for minor incursions, months before the first real breach, maybe a year before full-scale invasion. A year to turn sheep into wolves, Torres muttered. We've done more with less. Chun turned to face her crew. These men and women had followed her through hell itself. They had burned worlds and saved civilizations. They had sacrificed everything, including their place in history, to protect people who now feared them as monsters. Prepare the ship for diplomatic reception, she ordered, and start compiling training programs. If the Coalition accepts our help, we're going to need to bring them up to speed fast. 1,000 years of peace has made them soft. And if they don't accept? Park asked. Chin's expression hardened. Then, we do what we've always done. We stand between them and the darkness, whether they want us to or not. The Coalition Dreadnought Harmony's light dropped out of hyperspace 6 hours later, exactly on schedule. At 3 kilometers long, it was the pride of the Coalition fleet, a symbol of their technological achievement and military might. Next to the Prometheus, it looked like a yacht beside a battleship. High Chancellor Lyra herself had come, along with a delegation representing the Coalition's most powerful species. As their shuttle approached the Prometheus's hangar bay, they got their first close look at human engineering. The hull wasn't smooth like their own ships, but covered in overlapping armor plates that seemed to shift and move, always presenting the strongest face to any potential threat. Weapon ports were concealed behind retractable armor, but there were so many of them. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of weapons, each one capable of devastating firepower. Inside the hangar, they found an honor guard waiting. Humans in black armor that made Coalition-powered suits look like children's toys. The armor was scarred and pitted from ancient battles, but perfectly maintained. These were warriors who had seen the end of the world and lived to tell about it. Captain Chin met them at the bottom of the ramp, flanked by her senior officers. She had changed into her dress uniform, a simple black outfit marked only by rank insignia and a single ribbon, the Extinction War Service Medal that every human from her era wore. No other decorations, no glory marks. Just acknowledgement of service in humanity's darkest hour. High Chancellor, Chun said formally, offering a salute that Lyra's cultural database recognized as respectful. Welcome aboard the Prometheus. Lyra's energy form pulsed with control patterns as she studied the human captain. So young-looking, barely into adult years by human standards. Yet her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen civilizations burn. Captain Chun, Lyra replied, modulating her harmonics to convey respect tinged with caution. Your invitation is appreciated, though many question the wisdom of accepting it. Yet you came, Chun observed. That tells me you're taking our warnings seriously. I came, Lyra corrected, because I lead a coalition of 100 species and trillions of souls. If even a fraction of what you claim is true, I would be derelict in my duty to ignore it. Chun nodded and gestured toward the hangar exit. Then, let me show you the truth, Chancellor. Let me show you what we fought, why we fought, and why you need us now more than ever. They walked through corridors that told their own story. Blast marks that had been left unrepaired as reminders. Memorial walls covered in thousands of names. And everywhere, the quiet efficiency of a crew that had turned warfare into science, and science into survival. The delegation was led to a secure briefing room, where Chun had prepared a comprehensive presentation. Not just data and statistics, but the full history of the Extinction War. The first contact with the Devourers, when a human colony had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only twisted space and screaming silence. The desperate early battles, where conventional weapons proved useless against enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. We tried everything, Chen explained as holographic battles played out before them. Negotiation, containment, conventional warfare. Nothing worked. The Devourers didn't want territory or resources. They wanted reality itself, to consume and corrupt it into something alien. She showed them footage from the Battle of Kepler, 442, where 1,000 human ships had held the line against a Devourer incursion for 3 days. The alien entities were nightmarish to look at, geometries that hurt the mind, and forms that shouldn't be able to exist. They flowed through space like living darkness, dissolving everything they touched into constituent atoms and reforming it into more of themselves. We lost 60% of our fleet in that battle, Chun continued quietly. But we learned. We adapted. We realized that conventional warfare would never be enough. The presentation shifted to show human technological development during the war. Weapons designed not to destroy matter, but to reinforce reality itself. Shields that created pockets of stable space-time. And finally, the terrible decision to implement the Nova Protocol. Every world we burned, Chin said, her voice heavy with old grief, was already lost. The Devourers had established dimensional anchors, turning entire planets into gateways for their invasion. We couldn't save those worlds. All we could do was make sure the infection didn't spread. She showed them the math, the cold equations that had governed humanity's darkest decisions. How many would die if a world burned? How many would die if it didn't? The calculus of extinction, where the only winning move was to accept lesser horrors to prevent greater ones. Ambassador Vextor, who had come with the delegation, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You're saying every action we condemned you for was mathematically justified? I'm saying, Chin replied, that we condemned ourselves for it long before you did. Do you think we wanted to be the butchers of the galaxy? Do you think we took joy in burning gardens and ending civilizations? She gestured at the memorial walls visible through the transparent aluminum windows. Every name, there's someone who died fighting to save people who would hate them for it. Every human from my era carries the weight of what we did. High Chancellor Lyra floated closer to the displays, studying the data with her unique perception. Your records indicate the Devourers were completely eliminated. How can they return? Dr. Tanaka stepped forward to answer. We eliminated their presence in this dimension, Chancellor, but they exist primarily outside our reality. Think of it like, she paused, searching for an analogy. Like sealing a dam. We stop the flood, reinforce the barriers, but the water is still there, pressing against the walls. And given enough time, even the strongest dam develops cracks. Which brings us to now, Chun resumed. The quantum fluctuations we're detecting match the early stages of Devourer probing. They're testing our reality again, looking for weak points. And this time, humanity can't stop them alone. We put ourselves to sleep after the war. There aren't enough of us awake to mount the kind of defense we managed before. How many humans are there? A Quellian delegate asked nervously. On this ship, 15,000. In total. Chin's expression was grim. Maybe a few million in stasis aboard other ships scattered across the galaxy. We're a remnant, Chancellor, a ghost of the civilization that once stood against the darkness. The briefing continued for hours. Chin showed them everything, the weapons, the tactics, the terrible necessities of fighting an enemy that existed outside normal physical laws. By the end, the delegation sat in stunned silence, processing the reality that their greatest fear might be their only hope. Finally, High Chancellor Lyra spoke. You're asking us to trust you, to embrace the monsters we've spent 1,000 years learning to fear. No, Chinkedictive. I'm asking you to let us teach you to be monsters too. Because when the Devourers come, and they will come, being civilized won't save you. Being peaceful won't protect you. Only being strong enough to do terrible things for the right reasons will keep the darkness at bay. She stood, addressing not just the delegation, but recording devices that would carry her words across the coalition. We're not asking for forgiveness. We're not asking for acceptance. We're asking for the chance to stand between you and annihilation one more time. Because that's what humans do. We hold the line. We pay the price. We become the monsters so you don't have to. But this time, she added, we won't do it alone. This time, we'll teach you to stand with us. Because the galaxy is bigger than our guilt, and survival is more important than our shame. Outside the briefing room's windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, uncaring of the drama below. But between those stars, in dimensions folded away from normal space, ancient hunger stirred. The Devourers had been patient. They had waited while the barriers weakened, while the galaxy forgot the threat they posed. Soon, they would feast again, unless the monsters of legend could teach a peaceful galaxy how to bare its teeth. The delegation returned to their ship with minds full of terrible knowledge and hearts heavy with impossible choices. As the Harmony's light departed, Captain Chin stood on the observation deck, watching it disappear into hyperspace. Do you think they'll accept? Torres asked, joining her at the viewport. They'll debate. They'll argue. They'll look for any alternative, Chin replied. And then the first incursion will happen. Some colony will go silent. Ships will investigate and never return. And then they'll come running to the monsters they fear, begging us to save them again. At least this time we'll be ready, Torres said. Chin's reflection in the viewport looked older than her years, weighted with the knowledge of what was coming. We'll never be ready enough, Marcus, but we'll do what we always do. We'll stand, we'll fight, and we'll pay whatever price is demanded. She turned away from the stars. Have Artemis begin converting Cargo Bay 7 into a training facility. If the Coalition accepts our offer, we'll need to start immediately. 1,000 years of peace is a lot of bad habits to break. As she walked back to the bridge, alarms began to sound. Not combat alarms, but something almost worse, dimensional sensors detecting another spike in quantum fluctuations. The probing was intensifying. Time was running shorter than even their worst estimates. The first real test came sooner than anyone expected. 3 weeks after the Prometheus's return, a Coalition science vessel studying stellar phenomena in the Outer Rim went silent. The Curious Dream, a luminary research ship with a crew of 300, simply stopped transmitting in the middle of a routine data burst. Coalition Command initially assumed it was a technical failure. Ships went silent sometimes. Space was vast and dangerous even without interdimensional horrors. But then, the rescue vessel sent to investigate also vanished. No distress signal, no final transmission, just silence where voices should have been. Admiral Zektor stood in the Coalition's Strategic Command Center, watching as a third ship reported approaching the last known coordinates. On the main display, Captain Yellows of the destroyer Swift Justice appeared, her feathers ruffled with anxiety. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies, she reported. Space itself seems wrong here. Twisted. Our sensors are having difficulty. The transmission cut to static. Get them back, Zektor commanded, but his communications officer's frantic efforts yielded nothing. The Swift Justice had joined her sisters in silence. Admiral, his aide whispered, should we contact the humans? Zektor's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Coalition Assembly was still debating whether to accept humanity's offer of alliance. 3 weeks of political maneuvering, of species arguing about ancient grudges and modern fears. And now, while politicians talked, sailors died. Open a channel to the Prometheus, he ordered. Priority 1. Captain Chin appeared on the screen within seconds, as if she'd been waiting for the call. Behind her, the Prometheus's bridge hummed with activity. Admiral, the gravitational anomalies at grid reference 347, Mark 9. Zektor's eyes widened. You're already tracking it? We've been monitoring every dimensional fluctuation in the galaxy since we woke up, Chin replied grimly. That area lit up our sensors 6 hours ago. I was hoping your ships would report in before. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Can you help them? Zektor asked, abandoning military protocol for desperate honesty. Chin was already moving, issuing orders to her crew. We're plotting a jump now. ETA to the anomaly is 40 minutes at maximum burn. Admiral, I need you to keep all Coalition vessels at least 1 light year from that position. What's happening there? Your ships aren't equipped to handle it. Captain Chun, Zektor said formally, the Coalition hasn't authorized. With respect, Admiral, Chin cut him off. Your politician's authorization won't bring those crews back. We're going. You can court-martial me later if I survive. The channel closed, and Zektor was left staring at empty space. Around him, his staff waited for orders. Finally, he straightened his chitin plates and turned to his communications officer. Order all ships to maintain minimum 1 light-year distance from the anomaly. And he paused, making a decision that might end his career. Designate the Prometheus as a Coalition auxiliary vessel under emergency protocols. If anyone asks, they're operating under my direct authority. The Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the anomaly, and every alarm on the ship screamed at once. Space here wasn't just twisted, it was breaking. Reality itself was fraying at the edges, revealing glimpses of something else beneath. Colors that had no names swirled through the void, and geometry folded in ways that made the mind rebel. Shields to maximum. Chin barked. Reality anchors online. All hands, this is not a drill. We have a Stage 3 incursion in progress. Through the madness, they could see the coalition ships. The Curious Dream hung motionless, its hull covered in something that looked like frozen screams given form. The rescue vessel was half dissolved, its matter converting into something that existed in too many dimensions at once. And the Swift Justice, it was still fighting. The destroyer's weapons fired desperately into the void, energy beams that bent and twisted before dissipating harmlessly. Around it, shapes that couldn't properly exist in three-dimensional space circled like predators, each pass dissolving more of the ship's armor. Devourers, Dr. Tanaka confirmed, her voice tight. At least a dozen scout forms. They're feeding on the ships, using them to strengthen the breach. Can we save them? Chen asked. The Swift Justice still has structural integrity. The others? Tanaka shook her head. They're already more in their dimension than ours. Chen made the same kind of horrible calculation she'd made 1,000 years ago. Who could be saved? Who was already lost? The arithmetic of survival. Weapons free, she ordered. Target the Devourers around the Swift Justice. Gravitic lances only. We need to reinforce local space-time, not damage it further. The Prometheus's weapon spoke for the first time in a millennium. Lances of twisted gravity shot out, not to destroy, but to impose order on chaos. Where they struck, space stabilized, forcing the Devourers back into forms that could be fought. The scout forms recoiled, their attention turning from the destroyer to this new threat. They flowed toward the Prometheus like living darkness, reality bending around them. But humanity had learned hard lessons about fighting such enemies. The Supercarrier's reality anchors created a bubble of stable space-time around it, forcing the Devourers to partially manifest in normal reality to attack. Now, Chen commanded. Antimatter spread, full defensive pattern. Hundreds of warheads launched, each one a small star of annihilation. They detonated in perfect synchronization, creating a wall of destruction that even beings from outside reality couldn't ignore. Scout forms dissolved, their alien matter unable to maintain cohesion under the assault. But more kept coming. The breach was widening, and through it, Chun could see glimpses of the Devourer's realm, a place where physics went to die and madness was the only constant. Captain, her science officer reported, the Swift Justice is clear, but their engines are down. They can't escape the gravitational distortion. Then, we make them a path, Chen decided. Helm, take us in. Put us between the breach and the destroyer. Captain, Torres protested, that will put us directly in the feeding zone. Our anchors will hold long enough, Chen finished. We're not losing another ship. Not on my watch. The Prometheus surged forward, its massive bulk shoving through twisted space like an icebreaker through frozen seas. Devourers swarmed its shields, each touch draining energy and trying to pull the ship into their dimension. But the Supercarrier's defenses held, reality anchors screaming as they maintained a bubble of sanity in the madness. Behind them, the Swift Justice limped towards safety, its crew struggling to restore engine power. On its bridge, Captain Yellow stared in awe at the human vessel that shielded them. The Prometheus was taking damage that would have dissolved her ship in seconds, and still it held position. This is Captain Chun to Swift Justice. The human's voice came over comms, steady despite the chaos. We're extending our reality field around you. Stay close and match our heading. We'll get you out. Captain Chun, Yellow's replied, her voice shaking. The other ships are gone, Chun said bluntly. I'm sorry, but we can save you. Focus on that. As they retreated, Chun ordered one final action. Deploy Hammer Protocol. Let's seal this breach before it gets any wider. From the Prometheus's specialized weapons bays, a single missile launched. Not a conventional warhead, but something far more exotic, a dimensional stabilizer that would forcibly close the breach at the cost of making that area of space uninhabitable for decades. The missile struck the center of the anomaly and detonated. Reality screamed. The breach collapsed in on itself, taking the remaining Devourers with it. Space-time snapped back like a rubber band, and suddenly, the void was empty except for the two ships and the expanding debris of the destroyed vessels. Breach sealed, Tanaka reported. Local space-time is stabilizing. We've lost some armor integrity, and Reality Anchor 3 is showing stress fractures, but we're intact. Shin nodded, then opened a channel to the Coalition ship. Captain Yellows, what's your status? The avian captain appeared on screen, her feathers still ruffled, but her eyes sharp with newfound respect. Engines restored, minimal casualties. Captain Shun, you saved us. After everything we've been told about humans, we're monsters, Chun agreed quietly. But we're monsters who fight other monsters. Get your ship home, Captain. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them it's beginning. As the Swift Justice limped away toward Coalition space, Chun turned to her crew. Damage report. We can handle a few more encounters like that, Torres reported. But if they start coming in force, then we'll need help, Chun finished. Artemis, compile full combat recordings and sensor data. The Coalition needs to see what they're facing. Within hours, the footage was playing across every major world in the Coalition. The savage beauty of the Devourers, reality bending around them like water. The Curious Dream and her rescue ship being dissolved into nothing. And the Prometheus standing like an immovable wall between horror and the Swift Justice. In the Coalition Assembly, debates stopped mid-sentence as delegates watched humanity's monsters save lives at terrible risk to themselves. High Chancellor Lyra called for immediate session. The evidence is clear, she announced, her form pulsing with determined colors. The threat Captain Chen warned us about is real. We've lost 2 ships and 600 souls to entities our weapons cannot touch. The humans saved who they could and sealed the breach at considerable risk to themselves. One incident doesn't prove, a skeptical delegate began. One incident is one too many. Admiral Zektor interrupted, striding into the assembly in full military regalia. I've just received reports of similar anomalies detected in 12 sectors. Small for now, but growing. The dimensional barriers are failing, just as the humans warned. He brought up a galactic map, red dots marking each anomaly. We have perhaps months before these breaches become too large to seal with conventional means. Our choice is simple. Accept humanity's alliance and learn to fight these creatures or face extinction while clinging to our fears. The vote was closer than Sean would have liked, but it passed. The Coalition formally requested humanity's aid in preparing for the coming storm. Within days, human advisors were being dispatched to major military installations, bringing with them technologies and tactics born from the crucible of the Extinction War. On Haven Prime, the Coalition's premier military academy, Commander Torres stood before an assembly of the galaxy's best officers. Behind him, holographic displays showed Devourer attack patterns, dimensional physics equations, and weapon specifications that violated several perceived laws of physics. Everything you know about warfare is wrong, he began bluntly. You've trained to fight enemies that follow rules, that exist in the same reality you do. The Devourers don't. They are hunger given form, entropy with purpose. Your shields won't stop them. Your weapons won't kill them. Until you accept that conventional warfare is useless here, you're just offering yourselves as food. A Vorthan officer raised a claw. Then, how do we fight them? Torres smiled grimly. By becoming something they can't digest. By turning yourselves into poison. That's what humanity did. We didn't defeat the Devourers by being stronger. We defeated them by being worse. The training was brutal. Coalition officers who had spent careers perfecting civilized warfare were taught to think in terms of acceptable losses, calculated sacrifices, and the arithmetic of extinction. They learned to use weapons that killed the user as often as the enemy. They practiced tactics that would have been war crimes in any conventional conflict. And through it all, the humans pushed them harder. Every time someone protested that a tactic was too extreme, too dangerous, too inhuman, the instructors would show footage from the Extinction War. Entire fleets consumed in minutes. Worlds dissolved into component atoms. The price of hesitation measured in civilizations. Dr. Tanaka worked with Coalition scientists, teaching them principles of dimensional physics that their brightest minds struggled to comprehend. You have to stop thinking in terms of what should be possible, she told them repeatedly. The Devourers exist outside those constraints. To fight them, you must learn to think outside them too. She showed them how to build reality anchors, devices that forced local space-time to maintain coherence. How to detect dimensional weak points before they became breaches. How to create weapons that didn't just destroy matter, but reinforced the fundamental structure of reality itself. Back on the Prometheus, Captain Chun met with a stream of coalition leaders, each wanting assurances, each struggling to accept that their peaceful galaxy was ending. She gave them truth instead of comfort. We can teach you to fight, she told them. We can give you weapons and knowledge, but we can't give you the will to use them. When the time comes, and it will come soon, you'll have to choose between your principles and your survival. Choose wisely. Some left inspired, others left terrified, all left understanding that the age of peace was over. The dimensional anomalies continued to appear with increasing frequency. Small breaches that coalition forces, equipped with human technology and tactics, learned to contain. Each victory built confidence, but Chen knew they were only fighting scouts, probes testing reality's defenses. 6 months after the Prometheus's return, she stood in her ready room, studying reports from across the galaxy. 47 breaches sealed. 15 coalition ships lost, but hundreds saved by rapid response teams using human protocols. The galaxy was learning to bare its teeth. It's not enough, she said to the empty room. No, Artemis agreed through the speakers. The breach frequency follows an exponential curve. At current rates, we'll see the first major incursion within 60 days. Chun pulled up fleet distributions. The coalition had militarized faster than she dared hope, but they were still children playing at war. When the real invasion began, when Devourers poured through breaches too large to seal, the mathematics would turn cruel. How many human ships have responded to the wake-up signal? 17 so far, with another 32 in transit. The indomitable, furious, and relentless have already made contact with coalition forces. Captain Morrison of the Indomitable reports successful integration with Coalition Fleet 7. 50 human ships, each one a veteran of the Extinction War. Against a galaxy's worth of Devourers, it wouldn't be nearly enough. But it might be enough to show the Coalition what victory looked like, even if that victory came at a price that would horrify them. Artemis began compiling data for Operation Phoenix. Captain, that protocol requires. I know what it requires, Chen interrupted. Start the compilation. If we're going to teach the Coalition to be monsters, we need to show them what real monsters look like. And pray they're strong enough to become what survival demands. Outside her window, the stars continued their eternal dance. But Chun could feel the weight of what was coming, a war that would make the Extinction War look like a border skirmish. The Devourers had spent 1,000 years growing hungry. When they came, they would come in numbers that defied comprehension. But this time, humanity wouldn't stand alone. This time, they had a galaxy of students learning to become monsters too. The question was whether those students would graduate in time, or whether the final lesson would be taught by extinction itself. The real war was about to begin. The major incursion began at dawn on Kepler 442b, though dawn was a relative term on a world orbiting a star 400 light-years from Earth. The colony of New Haven represented everything the Coalition had achieved. 30 species living in harmony, turning a barren world into a garden over centuries of patient terraforming. It ended in minutes. The first breach opened in the planet's northern hemisphere, a wound in reality 50 kilometers wide. Through it poured nightmares that had been waiting 1,000 years to feed. Not scouts this time, but warrior forms, Devourers shaped for destruction, each one the size of a city block, their very presence causing matter to lose coherence. New Haven's defense fleet, trained in human tactics and equipped with reality anchors, responded immediately. They formed a defensive line, pouring fire into the breach, trying to stem the tide. For precisely 3 minutes, they held. Then, the second breach opened, and the third, and the fourth. By the time Captain Chun received the distress signal, New Haven was already half consumed. The planet's surface writhed with devourer biomass, converting matter into more of itself. 20 billion souls, reduced to screaming atoms in the time it took to brew coffee. All ships, emergency jump. Chun commanded from the Prometheus's bridge. New Haven is under massive incursion. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. We're moving to full combat protocols. Across the galaxy, humanity's scattered fleet responded. The indomitable, furious, and relentless broke from their training missions. The recently awakened vengeance, thunder, and defiant powered-up weapons that had slept for a millennium. And on 100 coalition ships, human advisors looked at their students and wondered if the lessons had been learned well enough. The combined fleet, 57 human vessels, and over 300 coalition ships, assembled at the edge of the New Haven system. What they saw defied sanity. The planet was gone, replaced by a writhing mass of devourer flesh that pulsed with obscene life. Around it, reality itself was breaking down, multiple breaches feeding ever more horrors into normal space. Dear gods, Admiral Zektor whispered from his flagship. How do we fight that? With fire and fury, Chin replied over the command channel. All ships, implement Extinction Protocol 7. Coalition vessels, slave your targeting systems to human command ships. Do exactly as we do, no matter how insane it seems. She turned to her crew. Deploy the package. From the Prometheus's deepest vaults came humanity's darkest creation, a weapon so terrible that even during the Extinction War, it had been used only 3 times. The reality bomb didn't destroy matter. It reinforced local space-time so violently that anything not native to this dimension was expelled with prejudice. The human fleet formed a perfect sphere around the infected system, each ship precisely positioned. Coalition vessels filled the gaps, their crews watching in awe and terror as humanity prepared to demonstrate why they had become legends. Captain, High Chancellor Lyra's voice came over a private channel. Our sensors show that weapon will render the entire system uninhabitable for centuries. There might still be survivors on the outer colonies. There are no survivors. Chun cut her off. Look at your sensors, Chancellor. Every living thing in that system is already dead or worse. We're not here to save New Haven. We're here to stop the infection from spreading. She opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships, reality anchors to maximum. When a bomb detonates, space-time is going to convulse. Any ship not properly anchored will be torn apart. Coalition vessels, stay close to your assigned human ships. We'll extend our fields to cover you. The package deployed, a small probe that looked insignificant against the cosmic horror it approached. It passed through the outer breaches, reality warping around it. Devourer warrior forms turned their attention to this new threat, but it was already too late. Detonation in 10 seconds, Torres announced. All hands brace for dimensional shear. The explosion, when it came, was visible across 3 sectors. Space itself screamed as the reality bomb imposed absolute order on a region that had become chaos. The breaches didn't close. They were slammed shut with such force that the dimensional walls fused solid. Devourer biomass, suddenly, forced to exist entirely in a dimension hostile to its nature, dissolved into quantum foam. Every ship in the fleet rocked as waves of dimensional force washed over them. Coalition vessels huddled close to their human protectors, shields sparking as reality tried to tear itself apart. But the human reality anchors held, creating islands of stability in the storm. When it was over, New Haven was gone. In its place was a dead zone, a region of space so dimensionally rigid that nothing could exist there. No matter, no energy, no life. A scar on the universe that would last until the stars died. Breach activity has ceased, Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice hollow. The dimensional walls in this region are now impermeable. Nothing will ever pass through here again. 20 billion people, someone whispered on the command channel. 20 billion people who are already dead, Chun responded firmly. If we'd hesitated, if we'd tried to save them, the infection would have spread to neighboring systems within hours. Then, we'd be mourning trillions. She brought up tactical displays showing the entire galaxy. This was just the beginning. Artemis has detected similar buildups in 17 other locations. The Devourers are testing us, seeing how we respond. Now they know we'll burn entire systems to stop them. Just like before, Admiral Zektor said quietly, "This is what you faced 1,000 years ago." "No," Chen corrected. "This is worse. They've had time to adapt, to learn from their last defeat. They're hitting multiple targets simultaneously, forcing us to spread our forces. Last time, we could concentrate our entire fleet on single incursions. This time, she didn't need to finish. Everyone could do the math. 57 human ships and 300 coalition vessels couldn't be everywhere at once. Hard choices were coming. Over the next weeks, those choices came with brutal regularity. A breach would open, and the combined fleet would race to contain it. Sometimes they arrived in time. Sometimes they didn't. The galaxy began to learn what humanity had known for 1,000 years. In war against the Devourers, victory was measured not in lives saved, but in lives not lost. The coalition adapted faster than Chun had dared hope. Species that had never known war became killers out of necessity. The peaceful Luminari learned to calculate acceptable losses. The artistic Quellians designed weapons of terrible beauty. Even the pacifist Etherians, beings of pure energy who abhorred violence, learned to weaponize their very essence against the invaders. But it was the Vorthans who truly embraced the darkness. Their warrior culture, dormant during centuries of peace, awakened with a vengeance. Admiral Zektor, commanding from his dreadnought Pride of Orth, became Chen's most apt pupil. "You were right," he told her during a brief respite between battles. "Being civilized is a luxury we can no longer afford. My people, we thought we understood war. We were children playing with toys. Don't lose yourself to it," Chen warned. "That's the real danger. It's easy to become a monster. The hard part is remembering why you became one." 3 months into the war, humanity revealed another secret. Deep in the Prometheus's hull, Chen led a select group of coalition leaders to a chamber none of them had seen before. Inside, suspended in stasis fields, were thousands of human soldiers in armor that seemed to drink in light. "The Extinction Corps," Chen explained. "Volunteers who underwent genetic modification, so extreme they can barely be called human anymore. They were our final solution, soldiers designed to fight Devourers in hand-to-hand combat." General Thix studied the nearest soldier through the stasis field. Even unconscious, the figure radiated menace. Too many joints, skin that shifted between solid and liquid, weapons that were part of their biology rather than tools they carried. "You turned your own people into monsters," she breathed. "We turned volunteers into weapons," Chen corrected. "Every one of them chose this, knowing they could never go back. They gave up their humanity so the rest of us could keep ours. Why show us this now?" High Chancellor Lyra asked. "Because the Devourers have started landing troops on infected worlds. Our ships can bomb from orbit, but sometimes you need boots on the ground, or what passes for boots among the Corps." Chen's expression was grim. "I'm asking for volunteers from your species. The modification process is extreme and irreversible, but it's the only way to fight Devourers in their preferred environment." The silence stretched for long moments. Then, Zektor stepped forward. "I have warriors who would make that choice, who would sacrifice their forms to save their people." Others followed. Not many. The idea of such radical transformation horrified most species. But enough. Enough to begin building a new Extinction Corps, one that represented the entire galaxy rather than just humanity. The war ground on. Systems burned. Fleets died. Heroes were made and unmade in the span of heartbeats. The coalition's casualties mounted into the millions, but they held. Each breach was contained, each incursion pushed back. The galaxy was learning to be monstrous, and it was working. Then, the Devourers changed tactics. Instead of multiple small breaches, they concentrated their efforts on a single point, the Vorthan home system. 300 breaches opened simultaneously, disgorging a fleet of bioships that dwarfed anything seen before. At the center was something new, a Devourer construct the size of a moon, pulsing with energies that hurt to perceive. "It's a gateway," Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice tight with fear. "They're trying to create a permanent portal between dimensions. If that thing fully manifests, Then, they won't need breaches anymore. Chen finished. They can pour through in unlimited numbers. Every available ship raced to the Vorthan system. The combined fleet, now grown to over 1,000 vessels as more coalition worlds militarized, formed up for what everyone knew would be the decisive battle. Either they stopped the gateway here, or the war was lost. Chun stood on her bridge, looking at the tactical display. The odds were impossible. The Devourers had learned from every previous engagement, adapted their tactics, concentrated their forces. This wasn't a probe or a raid. This was an invasion. All ships, she broadcast. This is Captain Chun. You all know what's at stake. You've all learned what it means to fight an enemy that exists outside our reality. Today, we put those lessons to the ultimate test. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Some of you will die today. Many of you. But you won't die as the victims you would have been 6 months ago. You'll die as warriors, as monsters who chose to be monstrous to save those who couldn't. That's the human way. And now it's a way too. The galaxy stands or falls here. No retreat. No surrender. We hold this line, or we die holding it. All ships, engage. The Battle of Vorth, as historians would later call it, was the largest space combat in galactic history. Over 1,000 coalition vessels, supported by every available human ship, threw themselves against a numberless horde of Devourers. Reality itself became a weapon as both sides twisted space-time to their advantage. The new Extinction Corps, coalition soldiers who had volunteered for transformation, deployed directly onto Devourer bioships. Their altered forms allowed them to survive in a hostile environment, to fight the enemy with blade and claw and weapons that existed in too many dimensions at once. Admiral Zektor led his fleet with brutal efficiency, implementing every terrible tactic the humans had taught him. When the Pride of Vorth was overwhelmed, he didn't retreat. He overloaded his reality anchors, turning his ship into a bomb that took a dozen bioships with it. The Luminari used their energy forms to create cascading feedback loops in Devourer nervous systems. The Quellians deployed artistically designed viruses that,